welcome back to Otaku no Video. As always, thank you very, very, very much for joining me for part 3 of my primer on Studio Ghibli. In the last couple of videos, I talked about their movies up until the mid-90s, and now we're going to move on to, I would say, kind of a tentpole movie of the Studio Ghibli canon, Princess Mononoke. Now, Mononoke grew out of Nausicaa the Valley of Wind, actually, Miyazaki's first original film. When Miyazaki made that, and as you'll recall, he couldn't get the funding, he ended up drawing a manga version of it to attract the attention to get the funding to make the movie. But Miyazaki didn't just draw a manga version of the movie. He had lots of ideas in his head, and he kept on drawing the manga even after he finished with the movie. He ended up spending, I think, about 13 years off and on drawing the manga, and so by the time it was done, it was a 1,000-page manga. And the movie only tells about the first 200 pages worth of that story. So there's a lot more there, plus Miyazaki's views on the environment and the themes he'd brought up had grown and matured over those intervening years. So his feelings were much more evolved, frankly, much more mature. So he wanted to kind of revisit Nausicaa and revisit those themes, and he decided, excellent idea, that instead of trying to make a sequel, which kind of wouldn't work because you'd have to make like 4 sequels, he would do an original story that tackled the same themes but with different characters in a different situation. So the basic premise of Princess Mononoke is that the main character, Ashitaka, is a prince in a village in sort of a feudal Japan type of world. His village is attacked by a demon, and in defending the town from the demon, he is cursed, and he has to leave the village so that the rest of the village will be protected from the curse. And he ends up in the middle of a situation where, and this is where the environmentalism comes in, this village has been clearing the forest around it to both get wood and to essentially mine the nearby soil for iron deposits. And they're turning the town into sort of an industrialized town. And so they need a lot of wood to stoke the fires, to refine the iron and so forth. And this has angered the local forest spirits, and they started to fight back. So this is a very complex, very mature movie about the concepts of environmentalism. And the important thing here is you have several different sides to this story. All of them have some right ideas, all of them have some wrong ideas. And you get to see these different viewpoints where, on the one hand, the humans are destroying a lot of this environment, but they're also doing it to prosper. They're not evilly trying to destroy the forest. They're just doing this, to live and to prosper. And the forest spirits see this as an encroachment on their land, an encroachment on all that kind of environmental stuff. But they're also waging this war against these humans, and that's not really right. So there's a lot going on, and it deals with themes of just basic morality, of all sorts of different elements to this movie that I couldn't even. It would take several videos just to go into, what Mononoke is about. And Princess Mononoke did extremely well. When I say extremely well, it was the highest grossing film in Japanese history up to that point. Not highest grossing anime, highest grossing film. Also, Mononoke got an interesting little boost by the fact that by this point, the Walt Disney Company had decided to try to license Miyazaki's movies and release them in America. Now, the reason this hadn't happened up to this point was because after Nausicaa came out, an American company licensed it, edited it down, reworded a lot of things, did a really cheesy dub, and released it over here as Warriors of the Wind, which many people consider to be a butchering of Nausicaa the Valley of Wind. I wouldn't go so far. I mean, the original Nausicaa movie has a lot of stuff going on, and because Miyazaki's mind was thinking of a lot of different plot lines, there are some elements of the original movie that just aren't quite explained fully. And if you read the manga, you understand, oh, that's, because it was going for here 500 pages later. So actually the editing down and the reworking of some of those plot lines actually helps the movie in some cases, but it is also just a very simplified story. And that horrified Miyazaki so much that he said, okay, I'm not licensing any of my films in America. No. Now, the problem was that the animators at Disney loved Miyazaki's movies. They'd been watching Studio Ghibli films for a long time. Huge, huge fans. If you look at some of the behind the scenes and extra DVD extras on the various Disney releases of Miyazaki's movies, you'll find interviews with major animators at Disney talking about how much they love Miyazaki's movies. So they were really gunning for Disney to license those movies. They ended up, well, Disney actually approached Studio Ghibli and approached Toshio Suzuki, the executive producer, the one who was working with Miyazaki and so forth, and said, we understand Miyazaki-san's reticence, but how about this? What if we sign in the contract that we will not remove or edit a single frame of any of his movies, and after we've translated the script and gotten our own translated script and matched the flaps and so forth, we'll send it back to you, and you can make whatever changes you want. And Suzuki said, that seems perfectly fair. So that was the arrangement that they went for. And so Disney licensed Studio Ghibli's movies. Now initially it was just for Miyazaki's movies, but they've since expanded that to basically every other Studio Ghibli film out there. And they've been releasing them over here. Now, Princess Mononoke, because it was such a big movie in Japan, Disney also released it over here in theaters in limited runs, and they released it on DVD. They got Neil Gaiman to adapt the script, and it was a big deal, and they just did a really solid job with the dub and everything so forth. And remember, this is a dub from the late 90s, so dubbing was not really good back then. It really hadn't evolved to where it is now, matured to where it is now in America. So the fact that they got a really good dub together says a lot for Princess Mononoke. And remember, Studio Ghibli had been making primarily, I don't want to say kid-oriented films, but more family-friendly films for quite a while. And Princess Mononoke established the fact that they could make a serious adult movie. I mean, Mononoke is definitely not aimed at children. There's people getting decapitated and arms getting sliced off and things like that. And it's a serious, mature work. So this established for, especially the Japanese audience, the fact that Ghibli had these chops. Meanwhile, Isao Takahata, he of Grave of the Fireflies, was also working on a project. He released a movie in 1999 called My Neighbors the Yamadas. Now this is very different. It is based on a 4-koma manga, or a 4-panel gag manga. Think very much like Peanuts. In fact, it has a sort of squiggly style. Everyone's sort of quasi-chibi. And it's a domestic comedy about a sort of standard suburban household, modern suburban household in Japan. And so it's just about normal modern urban life. It's funny, it's cool, but that's what it is. And moreover, because he wanted to have this very squiggly artistic style, the colors, it has this very watercolor style palette. And so the colors, like in watercolor, don't always exactly overlap, or don't always exactly stay in the lines of the black and white, or the black lines. So it looks very distinctive. I really have never seen a movie look quite like this. And it works, because it's trying to look like a Peanuts special, Charlie Brown special. Not exactly, but you know what I mean. Meanwhile, Miyazaki was busy as well, and in 2001 he released Spirited Away. Now, most anime fans, I think, have at least heard of Spirited Away. A lot of you have probably seen it. And the thing is, this was inspired by Miyazaki's interactions with one of his friend's 13-year-old daughter. And he started thinking about the issues and pressures and what it's like to be a 13-year-old girl in the modern times, and the things that 13-year-old girls are expected to do or not to do. They're not expected to have any responsibility. They're expected to be kind of babied in a lot of ways. And he wanted to make a film about that, and about a girl sort of coming to grips with personal responsibility. So he made Spirited Away. Again, hugely popular, one of the highest grossing films in Japanese history. Huge, 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 huge. Disney released it over here in limited release. Did well, thumbs up from everyone. And Spirited Away it's a classic Miyazaki film. Beautiful animation, memorable characters, distinctive characters, and a very clear driving through line of plot where you know what the stakes are, what the issues are, what the characters have to do, and they're kind of being pushed forward along that plot pretty consistently and pretty dramatically throughout most of the film. There are times when that's not happening, but then he uses that to great effect. So, awesome. Then a year later, Studio Ghibli released another film, The Cat Returns. Now this is an interesting story. Remember Whisper of the Heart, the movie I talked about in the previous primer, that was based on an existing manga? Miyazaki went back to the original artist and said, we would like to do sort of a spin-off story based off Whisper of the Heart, sort of a quasi-sequel thing. Would you be willing to do a little one-off story? So she did. And Ghibli started working on that, making a movie out of it. And as they developed it, they realized it was such a strong story, and there was so much there, and the folks involved in it were so committed to it, and it just looked so good that they decided it merited a full movie release. So they expanded it into a full-scale movie. I think it's like 70 minutes long, so it's a little short by movie standards, but it's a full-length story. And they released The Cat Returns. I love The Cat Returns. Partly because I was very much a Ghibli fan by this point. I had seen pretty much all of Ghibli's films by this point. And so when this came out, I had seen Whisper of the Heart. I saw a trailer for The Cat Returns like when it was announced in Japan, so I saw some of the original footage of it, and I got really excited, so I watched it. And it's just a lovely story of a teenage girl coming to grips with herself. I mean, the main character is kind of goofy. She's a high school girl who's not really comfortable with herself and her life and so forth, and then she saves the life of a cat who turns out to be the prince of the cats and who invites her to the cat kingdom. Awesome. So she has this whole fantasy adventure, and really fun movie, again more family friendly. And the thing is, The Cat Returns is a classic date movie. Easy for girls to watch, easy for guys to watch, fun, adventurous. The plot keeps moving quite quickly, and it's fun. So those are the movies sort of from the late 90s and very early 2000s of Studio Ghibli. In the next video in this primer, I'm going to talk about the rest of the movies that Ghibli has done up to this point, and we will see where they are now. So get ready for part 4. Stay tuned.